board has before it a resolution approving the Stark County District Library Board of Trustees Resolution number 2018-35, requesting the submission to the electors of Stark County on the November 6, 2018 ballot, the question of an additional 2.2 mils tax levy for current expenses for a continuous period of time.
Move to approve a resolution approving the Stark County District Library Board of Trustees Resolution number 2018-35, requesting the submission to the electors of Stark County on November 6, 2018 ballot, the question of an additional 2.2 mils tax levy for current expenses as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the resolution as presented. Today we have representatives with us from the district library. I would ask that if you're going to address the board that you please state your name and your position with the Stark County District Library Board of Trustees and or the library itself.
Hello, my name is Mary Ellen Acosta, and I am the new CEO, Executive Director of the library, and today is my third day here.
Welcome. And you're still here.
Yes, that's correct. And joining me today, I'll allow them to introduce themselves, sir.
I'm Sally Arkerloff, I'm a board member.
Chris Butler, I'm the fiscal officer. I'm Tom Ciccone, recently retired CEO at Mercy Medical Center, assisting the library in this effort to get the levy passed and sharing the commitment to do so.
And I'm Jean McFerrin. I'm the Deputy Director at the library.
Okay. Anything that you would like to make any statements before we might have questions?
Well, being as it's Mary Ellen's third day here, she asked me if I would just kind of give the recap for the commissioners about the levy and what we're intending to do with that funding and kind of a little bit of history behind it. So, as you all know, historically in Ohio, public libraries were funded through the state, and we, for decades, got state funding for all the public libraries in Ohio. It's part of the reason why Ohio has some of the best public libraries in the country, because you could be in a teeny tiny town in Ohio and still get state funding, and so we have these fabulous library systems. Well, over the last couple decades, that state funding has steadily decreased and decreased, and when we were funded through the state, very few public libraries in Ohio had local property tax levies. It was the exception. Over this course of the decreasing decades, now almost every public library in Ohio now has a local property tax levy. So, we're recognizing this as a permanent change to our funding structure. I don't think that anybody in this room anticipates that there's going to be a reversal in that trend, that all of a sudden the state is going to be giving us more money and, not looking for the local input on that. So at this point in time, we have a 1.7 mil levy, which we passed 7 years ago. And what we are proposing is that this 2.2 mil levy, if it passes in the fall, then we would actually ask the commissioners to stop collecting on the 1.7 mil levy. So we would get rid of that one and just have the 2.2 mil levy. This is obviously the first time we would have seen an increase in funding in the last 7 years, because we've just been consistent in that 1.7 mil levy. And as I said, I really think that this is such a crucial time for libraries as far as what the future is going to be like. And when you're looking at this local property tax levy really representing over 50% of our operating budget, I don't think it's putting too fine of a point on this to say that this is asking the voters whether or not they want to have library services in our communities. Because without that funding, needless to say, library services would look and feel very differently than they do now. That 50% is such a huge, more than 50% is such a huge part of what it takes to have libraries. Last year alone, we served over 2 million visitors who checked out over 4 million items. I believe that the folks in our communities are voting through their actions that they want library services, and we are looking for a way to provide these that is forward-thinking and cost-effective, and to be good stewards of every single penny we get from our taxpayers, and make sure that we're applying it to the community's benefit and to that shared resource that everyone can have access to. So that is the reason why we're here, to talk with you all about putting this on the fall ballot, and I'd be glad to answer any questions, or I know Chris would also. And anything else we could add for you or clarify?
Well, I guess I would start out by sharing with you that I have had constituents call me, and they're very concerned about it being a continuous levy. And so to that end, we have inquired into the Stark County Prosecutor's Office about our statutory responsibility. And according to Ohio law, this board has no choice but to put it on the ballot, whether we agree or disagree with the intent of the levy. So I want to make that clear, because when people call us after we take our action today, because we don't have a choice, I want you to understand, and I want the public mostly to understand, and I want the public at large to understand, it is now in their hands. This is not either an endorsement or a denial by this board in any way. It is doing our statutorily required duties according to Ohio law. But I guess my question to you is, because Jean, I think to be fair, you had discussions with all of us. I can only speak of our discussion. I think our biggest concern is that it is a continuous levy.
And, I really want to go back to that whole concept of, the funding structure for libraries has changed. That is not a temporary change. That is a permanent change, and we need a permanent solution to that. And I have to say that I think the resources that are spent on campaigns and passing levies could be much better spent, and the time and the energy and the effort could be plowed back into the library and to folks supporting the work of the library, rather than supporting the work of getting the levy passed once again and once again and once again. Regardless of what time frame we put on this, we would be coming back to the voters over and over and over. We have no other choice. That is where the funding comes from. And so, like I said, I really don't think it's an overstatement to say, this is about, do we want public library services in our community? And I think, that is the question we're asking voters.
You might mention that a couple of library areas in Stark County already have continuous.
Yeah. Tom, that's a great point. Tom just pointed out that there are some libraries in Stark County that currently have continuous levies, North Canton and Fulton, I think so. And this is a growing trend in public libraries as well. Like I said, historically, there were very few public libraries that had any local property tax levy. Now, almost every public library has a local property tax levy, and I think a lot of them are finding the same thing that we're finding, which is to say, if you want to be able to plan and be good stewards of taxpayers' money, knowing that you have that source of ongoing income is just the smart way to go about it.
The 1.7 million, is that continuous? It's currently on?
It is not. That was an 8-year levy.
And when does it expire?
2019.
2019. So if this would pass, that would expire anyhow. I mean, there's not a mechanism that we would take that 1 point.
Well, this would be double for
Double,
1 year.
yeah, for
For
1 year.
1 year.
Or it would be
there
two
will
stacked on top of each other for 1 year if they
Okay.
don't take
The
it.
library-
So you're not going to ask us to take that 1.7 mil away. It's just you're going to let it expire.
We're going to end it early if this one,
Yeah.
The
so that
Budget
there's no
Commission will be
overlap.
requested to not collect.
The library's intention
Thank
is
you,
to
that's
not
a better way of
tax
putting it.
both levies.
At the
We
same
will
time.
pull- Yeah, we will pull the 1.7 if the 2.2 passes.
Is that clear?
No.
Okay, I do have another question.
Sure.
What would happen to the system if, in fact, this doesn't pass? If it doesn't pass, we're not going to close the libraries.
Well, we're not going to close the libraries, but we are going to operate on 50% less,
Okay.
more than 50% less of what we currently have in our operating budget. So, when you think about your household budget, if it gets cut by 50%, you have to cut everything. You have to, look at every single place where you're spending that money and say, okay, now we have less than half of that. And
But you still have a
reduce.
year, if it doesn't pass, you'd still have a year at 1.7 to
Yes.
continue to operate. And then you'd have to make the decision whether to go out for a renewal on the 1.7 or go for a
Yes.
continuous 2.2.
So would it, we're basically looking at, what is it, 0.5%, increase in funding on a continuous basis rather than over the last 8 years having the 1.7. You know, there has been no increase during that period of time. We're looking for, you know, even though inflation has been modest, there have been increasing expenses. So it's, you know, if you look at it from an economic perspective, it's not an unreasonable amount of money to be asking for going forward as far as a percentage kind of increase. And then the fact that it's continuous just makes it that way, like some of the other communities in Stark County already have funded it. So again, it's not like we're trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to do what many libraries across the state have already accomplished.
And I think one other thing that I would like to point out, you know, we talk about libraries and about how people use libraries differently. People access information differently. And we know as a library system that that's going to continue to evolve and change. And so when we're talking about this 2.2 mil continuous levy, we're not talking about library service just for today. We're talking about library service into the future, into a future where we don't even necessarily know how people are going to be accessing information or what the newest thing is going to be. But we're going to build that flexibility and that adaptability into our system so that we're able to respond to the community's needs. You know, we were just talking about early literacy issues and workforce development issues, and those are so key to what we do. You know, I always say that my very favorite thing about public libraries is that people can walk in the door and they get access to opportunity. And I love it because it's up to each individual person to decide what that opportunity is for them, what that means to them. You can be learning to read, you can be studying for the LSAT to get into a great law school, you can want to learn how to make something or bake or cook or whatever you want to do, and you can find that at the library. And it's there for each and every one of the residents of our community, and they can access it to take themselves from here to there, whatever that means to them. And I know that the commissioners have always supported the libraries in the past, and I should have started with a thank you for that, you know, so I apologize for not saying that at the beginning, but we do appreciate the fact that you have been supportive of the library.
Well, Mary Ellen, you've jumped in with both feet.
Yes. Right into the fire.
Yes, and it just for my purposes, you came from where?
Montgomery Village, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C.
And do they use property tax to support their libraries?
They do, but it's a very different structure. The library system there is actually a county department.
I see. Okay, thank you.
We're having a very different conversation.
Yes. Any other questions or comments?
I'm just curious what the specific detailed spending plan is for the new revenue.
So really, this is basically for current expenses is where we're at with this, because that's what the 1.7 mil levy is covering, and just with the increase over those 7 years of not having any increases. We are, you know, going to continue the services that we're currently providing for our customers and for the community. We're looking at each of our library buildings. Like I said, we, you know, are thinking about how people used to use libraries, and a lot of our buildings are set up great for that, and so how people use libraries today and how they might use them in the future. We're looking to change that, the spaces, the actual physical spaces, and I think there's such a huge asset in each of those neighborhoods where the libraries are. Chris, I know you always point out, what was the year the iPhone came out?
Yeah, it's been about 10 years.
It's been about 10 years, you know, and our buildings haven't been, you know, changed or renovated in more than 15 years, you know. So when you think about the differences in how people access information, we really need to think about upgrading those spaces so that they can fulfill the needs of today's library users as well as the future library users.
So you brought up the buildings. So if in fact there were some building changes, are you then going to come back and ask for a capital levy?
No. We are going to be using the current operating expense money to take care of those renovations and changes.
Have you done any sort of master plan or anything like that to address the building? Or, like you said, you don't know how the future, how we're going to access things. What's 5-10 years out, and especially in regards to the building? I know you had to when over in Jackson, you had the debate about the smart store instead of the traditional library and things like that.
So really, the Jackson building, the old building, ended up having a lot of structural problems, and in the end, we decided it was more effective to actually tear that building down and rebuild rather than try to fix those problems that were pretty inherent to the way it was built. So it kind of ended up being a great opportunity for us because we were able to use the storefront location that was the temporary location as an idea incubator where we tested a lot of the things that we think customers are interested in now. So just as an example, the Jackson space has a 24/7 outer lobby where you can reserve books. They're put in a locker for you. You scan your library card, the little locker door pops open, you take your book away at 3 in the morning if you choose to, right? We also have vending machines, so you can get a library book just like you get a bag of chips. You can do that when the library's open or when the library's closed. You can do that. We're trying to meet people where they are and when they need the library without saying, we need you to conform to what we think of as good service. We're trying to be that service for what folks are trying to when they want to access us. So another example we have from Jackson is we have fewer actual desktop computers for the public in that space, but we have laptop vending. So you can scan your library card, a laptop pops up, you can take it over to the nice little counter height seating by the window and work on a laptop, and you can print from that, or you can work on your resume or apply for college, do whatever you want to do on that, and you kind of have your own space, and you can take it to a comfy chair. You don't have to sit at a desktop the way most of our spaces are configured now. So those have been a couple of the really popular things that we've done there. I think the key piece, and the piece I was referring to earlier, we have put every piece of furniture in that space on casters so that it can be movable and flexible and changeable, so that we don't have things bolted to the floor or only one place where you can plug that thing in, which happens a lot in older buildings, right? So it's all Wi-Fi enabled, and we can really use that space in a variety of different ways. We can change it up. In fact, I love the fact that patrons come in and they change it up, so the furniture's never quite in the same, configuration that we originally set it up the way we thought would look really pretty. But by the end of the day, those things have moved around because that's how people are using it. And, in the bigger sense, like I said, we can move things that, maybe people don't need the same number of desktop computers. Well, we don't have a big, stable, permanent countertop for that. We have movable, flexible furniture that can be used for other things.
Just another quick question for Chris. What are your 3 main sources of revenue at the library?
So our number one source is our current levy. It's a little over 50%. It's roughly 55% actually. The second largest source is our PLF. It's almost the remaining 50%. Those two together are 97% of our revenue for the past 3 years. And then the remaining sources are actually usually through donations or some of the fees and different things that we collect. But it's just kind of a miscellaneous for that final 3%. So as Gene said several times, this levy is a huge part of the library, and sometimes it's difficult to plan things because we have to plan every 8 years to come back and ask for 50% of our revenue again.
Kind of like the
That
county.
sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Kind of like what we do. So, Brant, just help me to remember, I should know this, but the new levy from the auditor came in at about $11 million.
Yes.
Is that correct? Is that based on not the new valuation?
That's based on the valuation in the district based on $5 billion. Oh,
No.
no.
So they'll get more than that
I would assume that.
because values are going up.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, well, you know what? Good luck. I wish we were as bold because we believe, I believe, I'm not going to speak for my colleagues. I believe that you go back to the constituency every 8 years and ask for a report card. That is my personal belief, because when you give continuous, it's pretty hard to take it off. But when you are on your toes and have to justify every 8 or 10 years, because you can set that whenever, I think it makes us all sharper. That's Janet Creighton's opinion on it. You're going to ask me sooner or later, so I might as well just say it. That's my opinion. Okay, with that, we'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed, motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're welcome to stay, or if you don't want to be bored with county government, welcome to go.
Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, thank you so
Good
much.
luck.
Good luck.